What you must understand as an investor, compound returns are not logical. Let me show you what we're talking about here. Say you have $100,000, walked over to your bank, and they say they can get you one for 4%. These are the actual numbers. After the first year, at 4% interest, you'd have $104,000, and that would be cumulative. These are the actual numbers after 25, 30, 35, 40, and 45 years. We're going to specifically be looking at the 35-year column. I've got the graph showing here. After 35 years, that 100,000 would have grown to 394,000. You would have put in 100,000. This is the blue that you put in, 100,000. This is what that 100,000 would have earned over the next 35 years. If you're in a 4% CD, you'd be just short of $400,000. Now, what if you increase that? What if you can find an investment that paid you 8%? You'd think you'd have double these numbers, correct? Let's see what happens. 394,000, just short of 400,000. Yet you can go and get an 8% return. Now you're 1.478 million. Wait a minute. Didn't we just say 4% got you 400,000? Wouldn't you think that 8% would give you right here 800,000? Nope. It's $1.478 million. Again, let me go back here and show you 4% CD, 394,000 of which you put in 100,000. You put in 25% of the money, the total amount, and your money earns 75% of what the total is, 394,000. And yet, if we just go to the 8% return, now you're at 1.478. You put in 6.8% of the money. See it down here? That's that 100,000. Look how much it earned. It earned 93% of that 1.478 million. Look how it took off. It's a lot more than the 800,000 you would have expected going from 4% to 8%. Now let's do one more thing. We like to, on this channel, we like to use the S&P 500. The S&P 500 has averaged over 10% over the last 100 years. Watch what happens when I hit enter. Right now at 8%, you're getting 1.478 million. As soon as I hit that, bingo, 2.81 million. You've got twice as much as you just had at the 8%, but you only went up by 2%. That's the compounding effect of what compound interest can do. It isn't logical. Going from 4% to 8% doesn't double your money, and going from 8% to 10% doesn't just go up by 25%. It goes up by double. And if we carry it out 40 years, the numbers are even more impressive. But what have we not taken into account here? This is not how investors invest. Investors don't start out with something and just don't add anything to it. Let's start out the way investors would do it. Let's say you don't have anything saved up. You're young, you got 35 years, 35, 40 years ahead of you, and you can save $300 a month. That would be $3,600 a year. I want you to go back to the 4% and see how these numbers work out now. Now we got, because you don't have the 100,000 accumulating all the way through, you just got this accumulation right here going through. These amounts gradually getting up, eventually get to 100,000 after 20 years. This is 4%. But watch what happens. At 4%, 35 years, you have 265,000, of which you put in 47% of the money, and your money earned 52.5% of this total of 265, which is right here. You can see it basically half and half. Watch what happens when I change it to 8%. 8%, now you're up to 620,000, of which you put in 20% and your money earned 80% of that total. Watch what happens when I go to 10%. Remember, this is 620 at 8%. Watch what happens when I hit it. Now it's basically $1 million at 10% interest. Again, that's what the S&P 500 has averaged over the last 100 years, 10%. That's why we call this channel $1 Million Made Easy, because investing just $300 a month into S&P 500 index fund, you would have basically $1 million after 35 years. Now, I want to do one more thing. Let's go to 4% here. Now, let's look at the 40-year column. 40-year column, 4%, you'd have 342,000 after 40 years. Now we're looking at the 40-year column, of which you would have put in 42%, and your money would have earned 57% of that total of 342,000. Watch what happens when I go to 8%. Remember 342,000? 8%. Now you're up to 932,000. Again, that's with an 8% return. Here's the graph here showing you how much you put in and how much your money earned. Let's do one more thing. Let's go with the S&P 500 average return. Watch what happens, folks. 1.593 million. Here's the money you put in. You put in 9%, and your money earned 91% of the rest of this total of 1.593. So you can't just consider your logically, you think 8% would be double 4%, and 10% would be 25% more than 8%. That's not the way it works, compounding effect. Now, you're going to say, but where can you get a 10% return every year? You don't. That's why I want you to show you this right here. This is a graph using just the 35-year graph using 1929 returns. Why do I pick 1929? Because you'd think that would be the worst time to be in the stock market. 35-year period beginning with all these down years. But I want you to look at what the graph actually shows. In this case, we're just going to invest $250 a month. That'd be $3,000 a year. And yet after 35 years, if you had returns like 1929 going forward, oh, it was a bumpy ride getting there. It wasn't a graph like this. No, but look at what you ended up with. Over $2 million investing just $250 a month. That's what compounding can be if you're in it for the long term. That's the key to all these numbers, being in it for the long term. Then you get graphs like this, 35-year graph, like 1929 numbers. Look at that, folks. 1929 numbers, it was a bumpy ride getting there. But look at what you ended up with after 35 years, basically $2 million. But folks, that's what we do in this channel. We run all kinds of different numbers for people. We just want to, in this video, we want to show you the importance of the compounding effect, that 10% is not just double 5%. 8% is not just double 4%. It's a lot more than that if you're in it for the long term. And that's why I love to catch people when they're young. They have 35 or 40 years until they retire. But please consider subscribing to this channel. Please share it with people, especially young people. Let them see this compounding effect, how they can get it working for them. And please like the videos, and thanks so much for watching.